Hello and welcome back to the Air Armoury. I'm JRH and today I'm looking at the BSA Cadet air rifle. So this is the Cadet air rifle made by BSA, or the Birmingham Small Arms Company. It was in production between 1945 and 1959. Given its small size and the name Cadet, it was clearly aimed at younger shooters, although it was also a popular choice for shooting galleries at fairgrounds. Now, we have actually seen one of these on the Air Armoury before, but it didn't look quite like this one. You can see it in a video called Old Mystery Air Rifle. Now, that particular gun was in terrible condition. It was missing its stock and it had no markings other than the serial number, which obviously made it a little tricky to identify. But as I said in that video, I had my suspicions that it was a BSA Cadet, but now I've got this one, I can confirm that. I'll put a link to that video in the description below in case you're interested, but for now, let's take a closer look at this example of the Cadet. The Cadet is 37.5 inches or 95.25 centimetres long, and it weighs 5 pounds or 2.25 kilograms. It has a 14 3/4 inch or 37.5 centimetre barrel, and they're available with either rifled or smoothbore barrels. This particular one is rifled, although the rifling is quite well worn, and they were available in 177 calibre only. Now, it's a well made gun, there's no plastic on it anywhere, and all the metal parts are nice milled steel rather than cheaper stampings or castings. And it just has a lot of nice things like a big solid end block which is threaded and screws into the main cylinder, rather than everything all being held together just with a simple retaining pin through the main cylinder there. It has a hardwood stock. Now, I'm not sure what type of wood it is, but it's got a nice grain to it, and it's got quite a nice finish to it. Now, the profile of the stock is quite unusual for an air rifle in that it's very rounded at the sides, but that does make it quite comfortable to hold. You can get a good grip on it, albeit it's quite a short stock. Now, the washers for the stock screws here stick out quite far and are quite uncomfortable, but I'm pretty confident that they are not original to the gun. Now, it doesn't have a butt plate, but it does have some grooves cut into the butt of the gun to help add grip when you shoulder the rifle, and that does help. And on the left hand side of the stock, it has BSA stamped into it, and that's quite a cool feature in my opinion, as you don't often see air rifles with markings on the stock. As with the metal parts, the stock also feels like good quality. I can't think that stock of this shape is as quick or easy to make as one with more simple flat-sided design, especially not in the 1940s. And some stocks even had a cross-grain strip of wood spliced into the grip to add strength, presumably for stocks which didn't meet BSA's quality control for strength. Now, the Cadet sights are very basic, but they're also very typical for the time. It's limited to open sights, there's no facility to mount a scope or anything. So there's just a simple notch at the back, and then a small blade on a ramp at the front. Both sights are held in with dovetails, so they can be adjusted for windage by tapping them either way, but there is no provision for elevation adjustment. It's not a fantastic sight picture, but again, as I said, it's typical for the time period. So I'm now going to remove the stock so that you can get a better look at the trigger. With the stock off, you can see that it has a very simple trigger. There isn't a trigger unit as such, as the top of the trigger is itself the sear, and it's just a single stage non-adjustable with a single spring behind the trigger for tension. You'll also notice that it's a very small thin trigger that's just made from a thin steel bar or rod, which has then just been flattened slightly to make a trigger blade, as opposed to it being milled or stamped from a flat piece of steel. Now, with the small size of the trigger combined with the small trigger guard and shape of the trigger, I do find it tends to squash my finger slightly between the trigger and the stock when I pull the trigger, although I don't suppose that a child or cadet would have any issues with it. It's quite a heavy trigger pull, but I guess that makes sense as the gun is designed for younger shooters, and as it doesn't have a safety, which wasn't uncommon for the time, to avoid accidents you don't want a very light trigger. Looking at the markings, you've already seen the BSA logo in the stock, but most of the markings on the Cadet are, or at least should be, on the top of the main cylinder here. But as you can see, it is blank. Now, those markings are only on very lightly, almost as just part of the finish, and they are prone to wearing off. This is the second example of a Cadet I've owned, and neither have retained the original markings. But on here, over 3 lines, it should say the Birmingham Small Arms Co. Limited Cadet 177 air rifle, made in England. We then have a serial number on the left hand side of the end block. The serial numbers for the Cadet have various different letter prefixes which can be used to date the gun. The A's were made from 1945 to 1946, the B's from 1946 to 1949, the BAs and Ws were from 1949 to 1951, and lastly the BC guns were from 1951 to 1959. So this one, being B 21,560, means it was made between 1946 and 1949. Now, the final marking you might come across on the Cadet are the letters SB, marked in 2 places, on the side of the barrel block here and on the end block near the serial number. Only some of the guns have that marking. It's not found in all of them, including this one, and there is some conflicting information about what that actually means. Dennis Hiller, in his book A Collector's Guide to Air Rifles, states that it's to show it is a smoothbore gun, but the Blue Book of Air Guns says that it is simply an export marking. Now, I'm not sure which is correct, but my gut feeling is that it's an export mark. The reasons being that if it's just to denote that it's smoothbore, why not only mark the barrel? Why mark the end block as well? There are no guns marked R to denote a rifled barrel, and as the Blue Book is American, the authors Robert Beeman and John Allen are likely to have encountered more exported guns. Now, I'm not an expert. I've not seen enough Cadets up close to confirm either way, so I could be wrong. What would be interesting though is to see if anyone has got a Cadet. Put a comment below saying whether it has the SB marking or not, whether it has a rifled barrel, and what country you're in. And if enough people respond, I'll do a quick follow-up at some point, either in a video or in a Facebook post. Now, the reason I've looked at markings with the stock off is because there is actually one final marking which is only visible once the stock is removed. Now, on the underside of the main cylinder, there's a 32, and also again another 32 on the underneath of the end block. Now, I don't actually know what that's in relation to, as it's not anything like the last digits of the serial number or a year designation. So I've put the stock back on, and I'm now going to do a bit of testing and shooting. Now, whilst you can see that the gun does fire, it is currently suffering from some real power issues. Now, I don't mean that it's slightly underpowered, I mean that I'm having to run all of my pellets through the barrel with a cleaning rod before shooting them, otherwise, more often than not, it doesn't have the power to actually push them out the barrel. Now, I haven't had it apart yet, so I don't know what the issue is, whether it's with the spring or the seals or something else, but because of that, I'm not actually going to do an accuracy test. I'm finding that it's so low powered that the pellets are dropping very quickly, which means I'm having to hold so far over my target that all it's going to take is one stray or one pellet to not drop as quickly, and I risk missing my backstop, which is obviously something I'm not comfortable in doing. Instead, I'm going to go straight to putting some pellets over the chronograph so I can see just how low powered this is, and to do that I'm going to be using these 8.4 grain Air Arms Diablo field pellets. As you saw there, I struggled to get a good string of shots over the chronograph, but I do have my test sheet here and I've already done all my calculations. So with those 8.4 grain Air Arms Diablo field pellets, I got an average velocity of 178.96 feet per second, with a spread of 88.1 feet per second, the highest being 208.3 feet per second and the lowest being 120.2 feet per second. So using an average of 178.96 feet per second, that gives me a power of just 0.6 foot-pounds. Now I'm not sure what power these would have been when new, but obviously significantly more than that. So there you've seen the BSA Cadet air rifle. Now this is a great little gun, it looks nice, it's very well made, although this one obviously has a few issues. I think by today's standard, maybe the sights are the only thing that lets it down slightly, but they're a product of their time, so I don't think you can complain about that too much. Now, for an adult shooter, it does feel a little on the small side, so it's worth mentioning that BSA did also make a larger version of the Cadet called the Cadet Major, which they made at roughly the same time, from the late 40s to late 50s. The Cadet Major is 42 inches or 106.5 centimetres long, and it weighs 5.5 pounds or 2.5 kilograms. And as well as the larger size, the Cadet Major also had an adjustable trigger and an adjustable rear sight. Now, if you want to add a BSA Cadet to your collection, they're readily available on the second-hand market, and the going rate seems to be somewhere between £100 and £200, although I had seen them sell for less than £100. I hope you found the video interesting. If so, be sure to like, comment and subscribe to the Air Armoury. And until next time, keep your arms in the air.